Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Real Stories. Today, we are going to get into 3 paranormal stories that I am very excited to read to you guys. And just a reminder that if you have any stories, either paranormal or in the Let's Not Meet variety, email them to me at thearspodcast@gmail.com. We're always looking for more stories. Even if you're not sure if your story fits, send it anyways, and I'll get back to you and I'll let you know. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Back in 2000, I was 13 years old, living in the Midlands of England in a small town between the cities of Coventry and Leicester. While out with 2 other friends, one my age and the other 2 years older, we decided to explore the younger friend's great uncle's house. My friend used to boast about how old the house was, and the fact that this great Uncle Jim had a lot of keepsakes from his past and other antiques. We all rode our bikes over to the house and explored the garden first. In the garden, there was an old gnarly tree as well as a lot of overgrown grass and weeds with an unkempt greenhouse. We decided to go in. It was known that Jim, the owner, was out for the day, and so we poked around inside. There was indeed a lot of old items and antiques. None of us are well off, so the house was small and nothing incredibly valuable was inside, just things that are personal worth to Jim. We decided to look upstairs. This is when it got real. We found ourselves in the bedroom and we were looking through an old bedside table with a dresser and mirror. We were curious, so we opened one of its drawers and looked at an old pocket knife. This was left on top of the dresser. My younger friend then opened a picture. It looked like a big locket with no chain. He opened it up and placed it on the dresser top in front of the mirror. I'll never forget that picture. Hand-painted and very well done. It was of a woman, 30 to 40 years old, wearing a low-cut and fancy white dress. Around her neck was a big silver necklace with a turquoise jewel in the center of it. Her eyes seemed to follow us, seemed to know where we were, and her expression was unapproving and unmoving. We started to freak out at this. Just then, the 3 of us agreed that the picture was odd and it was time to pack up and stop exploring. Then, the room got very cold. Click, as it was a clear sign and we all started to fret. The picture, knife, and everything we had gotten out of there went quickly back into the dresser. We heard the back door open, slam shut, and then footsteps were making their way towards the stairs. "Jim?" My friend, who was related to the homeowner, shouted, but no reply was given. And again he shouted, but no answer. We were all on the landing at this point, looking down at the stairs towards the lower rooms. We could still hear the footsteps, now really close. Then the footsteps were on the stairs, which we could all plainly see. I must clarify, these footsteps were clear and loud, and it was definitely not a neighbor or some other similar noise. Something was coming up the stairs right in front of us, but there was nothing to be seen. I don't know how, but I knew that there was something on the stairs even if none of us could see it. At this point, we all panicked. We ran towards the back door and out of the house. We had to run through this invisible thing in order to get downstairs and out of the house. I should have jumped over the stair banister as the footsteps were at the landing, just at the point when we would have touched whatever it was. I and the other 2 were frozen in place. We were running at full pace and had a lot of momentum between us, but we were frozen in place. We just hit a dead stop, like someone had hit pause on a remote. Impossible as this was, I remember straining against whatever was holding me, trying with all my strength to carry on running, but I could not move a finger. It must have lasted no longer than 3 seconds, but it felt much longer. Then, just as it suddenly had all begun, we all started moving again. Because we were all fighting whatever was holding us, we all landed in a heap at the top of the stair. I pushed my way up and ran outside with my 2 friends. We biked to a nearby park very quickly and tried to make sense of what had just happened. I have never had such a frantic conversation, but safe to say, no one could rationalize what just happened. Needless to say, we did not go back to Uncle Jim's. Whoa, that was a creepy story. So, first of all, I don't know if these people had ever seen like a scary movie or like a scary episode of a show, but messing with antique stuff is never a good idea. And the title of this story is actually called Don't Mess with Antiques. So they ended up finding that out, but old stuff is just, let it be. I don't even know what you're supposed to do with like super old things, but they're not supposed to be messed with. They need to be handled with care and respect, and ghosts don't like people snooping through their things, which is a little goofy because, if you're dead, what do you expect to become of your artifacts? Like, people have to go through them and, donate some, toss some, whatever. So either way, creepy story. So we have a group of younger kids, our main character's 13, and they have somebody else who's 13 and somebody who's 15 with them, and they decide to go to this creepy house that their Uncle Jim has. And because they do this because they heard a lot of older things and antiques were in this house. So they thought that they should explore. So they go up and they're looking at some pictures and some old pocket knives, and suddenly the room gets cold. And if you're a ghost enthusiast like I am, you know that when the room gets cold out of nowhere, there's a presence with you, and that's why the room gets cold. So that's already a red flag that, something's up, something's not right. So they then hear people coming up the stairs, and it's like loud footsteps. And, their friend who's Uncle Jim's nephew calls out for Uncle Jim, like, "Hey, is that you?" No answer. So they then go to the top of the stairs and they hear the steps, but they don't see anything. So that's pretty terrifying, honestly. So they decide to leave, which, can't blame them for it. I probably would have left a little bit ago. But now they have to go through or past whatever is coming up the stairs since they're on an upper level. And when they do this, it's almost like they are caught by this ghost, almost like, bugs in a spider web where they just can't move. And what it also reminds me of is in like a dream-like world where, I'm sure that other people feel this too, but in a lot of my dreams, I feel like my emotions are in like 5 times slower motion than everything else going around me in the dream world. So they get stuck, like they're really trying to get out of here, but they're just like phasing through this ghost, this entity, this apparition, whatever you want to call it, but it stops their movement, which is really interesting because you don't hear about that super often. Like a lot of the times it's like, there's an apparition in the room and, they'll make a noise or they'll make a sound. But when people try and pass through them, there hasn't really been a lot of stories that I've heard like this. So it's very interesting. And they said that it lasted about 3 seconds, but, in a scary situation, every moment feels like, 10 minutes. So they said it was about 3 seconds where they just couldn't move, and they all felt this way. It's not like it was just, our main character or just one of her friends, all 3 of them. And they get out of there and they are trying to rationalize what just happened, and they can't because, how can you? It's not explainable. That's why we have these paranormal stories. That's why we have this episodes of the podcast, because some things are just supernatural and can't be explained. So definitely a very interesting story. I like that it was something unique that, we haven't heard too much about. So they're also talking about, does Uncle Jim know about this entity? Like, is this a family member? Like, did he just get a cursed house? How did this go? And they said that their friend spoke to him the day after, and he told him that he had no knowledge of an entity or that they had been over. So he did tell them to leave his stuff alone, though. Not that they, needed to hear that. But unfortunately, he passed away before they got to ask him who was in the picture. But apparently the house is sold now, and they don't know the people who purchased it. But their stuff has been passed around the family of their friend's family. And they think that family members went around and took their pick. And people, they were really young when this happened, but sometimes they say they drive through the area and they don't even want to drive by the house because it still creeps them out. So I don't blame them for that. Honestly, if I was in a haunted place, momentarily, as long as it's not like even if it was a house, I might go back just to try and document stuff to, try and convince people that I'm not crazy and that, my feelings are valid because something is definitely going on here. So, very interesting story. We'll be back with more creepy paranormal stories right after this word from today's sponsor, BetterHelp. The start of a new year can be very happy for some because it's filled with brand new beginnings and new experiences to be had, but it can also be overwhelming. If you're feeling overwhelmed, depressed, stressed, or anxious about the new year or just about life in general, today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help you. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and to help you. You can talk to your therapist in an online environment at your convenience. They have a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's network of 20,000 therapists that give you access to help that may not be available in your area. You just fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you can get matched with a therapist in as little as 48 hours. You can then schedule video and phone sessions and also exchange unlimited messages with your therapist at any time. You can also request a new therapist at no additional charge at any time. So join the 3 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/realstories. That's betterhelp.com/realstories. All one word. What better way to start off the new year than taking charge of your mental health? So do that today with BetterHelp. Now, let's get back to the stories. This is a true story. So I moved out of my mom's and in with my grandma when I turned 17. I'm now 22. When I moved in, I positioned my bed to face my bedroom door, and I often stayed awake quite late like any other teen would. One night, I had just turned off my TV, but my bedroom light was still on and my door was open so I could see perfectly into the hallway and the middle of the stair landing. I was sitting on my phone and saw something out of the corner of my eye coming from the bathroom side of my hallway. The bathroom is right next to my room, and it went into my grandma's room and the spare bedroom. I looked up and I saw a man with blonde hair and a trench coat, along with some sort of boots on and dark trousers. He was very pale looking at him, and he looked a mess, covered in dirt and everything. I freaked out thinking someone had broken in and was going to hurt my grandma and grandpa, so I grabbed the closest thing near me, which was a book, and started to get out of my bed to try and chase him out of the house. When he was walking down the stairs and he got to the middle part of them, he then turned back and looked at me and smiled. I then asked who he was and what he was doing in my house. He continued to walk downstairs. However, at the bottom of the stairs, the light from my bedroom stopped, so it was pitch black. When I ran down and turned the lights on, he disappeared. His face was flawless apart from some dirt. His eyes were a stunning blue color, not too dark but not too light. He had a stubble of facial hair, but he also had freckles. I double-checked all the doors and windows to make sure they were all locked and went back to sit in my bed to try and comprehend what I just saw. I have always believed in the afterlife and that spirits exist, so I had two thoughts. Either I was so tired that I imagined him, or he was an actual ghost. I spoke with my grandma the next morning to see if anyone had died in the house before she asked if I had saw someone, to which I replied, yes. She then asked what they looked like, and I described the man that I saw. She then told me to sit down because she had a story to tell me. She said, one day, her, my dad, my uncle, and grandpa were sitting in the living room, and my dad and uncle were sitting on one couch, and my grandpa and grandma on the other. She was reading a book and looked up and saw a man standing behind my dad, smiling down at him, and it was as if he knew him and was proud of him, and then he just walked out of the living room and disappeared. She told my grandpa, and he checked the house, and there were no signs of anyone else there. She then described him, and everything matched up with my description. We have seen him a few more times, and I have recently moved out, but when I was telling my grandparents that I was moving in with my fiancé, I felt so warm and calm, and my grandma said that she saw him in the doorway. I go back to their house and stay every so often, and whenever I do, I just feel like he is watching me. Nothing sinister or evil has happened in that house, and anyone who walks into it just feels warm and calm, so I like to think that this ghost has been protecting my family and the house for years. An update. I was speaking to my grandma about the ghost, and she said that my cousins were up last week. They're 3-year-old twins, and she said that they were running down the stairs giggling, saying that they were playing with a nice man and he was going to catch them. But my grandma said that they weren't scared or anything, that they were just playing and happy. That was very wholesome. I love a good, nice ghost story. They don't all have to be, some scary, insidious, paranormal activity type vibes. Sometimes it's just like a watchful protector, some sort of, afterlife guardian angel. And those stories are very refreshing because those happen a lot. And I like hearing them because ghosts have such like a negative connotation around them when it comes to a lot of these stories, but they don't always have to. So this starts with our main character, who is a girl living at her grandparents' house. And one night, she sees a guy walking through the grandparents' house, and he's walking down the stairs, and she gets a pretty good look at him. She's able to give a pretty good description of him. He's a pale man with blonde hair, wearing a trench coat, dark trousers, boots. Kind of like, low-key like the Undertaker's outfit, if you guys are familiar with wrestling, but normally trench coats are kind of suspicious, but with this vibe, he just seemed like an older guy, obviously probably lived a little bit long ago, maybe a relative of the family, and I'll get back to that in a second. But so she sees him, and originally she freaks out because, there's somebody in the house who's not her or her grandparents, and she's worried that, is this person trying to steal from them? Are they trying to harm them or their grandparents? So they're freaked out. So they go chasing after him, and they see him, and he kind of smiles at her, and then just continues to walk down the stairs. She can't really see him after he goes down there because the light from her room was what she was going off of, and as soon as she goes downstairs and turns the lights on, he's gone. So we already have, a supernatural element here. Where did he go? He kind of just poofed, disappeared. She said that she's always believed in the afterlife and spirits, so she was kind of open to the idea that it was a ghost, which is nice because a lot of people, they don't want to accept the truth even when it's literally right in front of their eyes. So she then goes the next day and asks her grandma, like, has anybody ever died in this house? And the grandma's like, did you see somebody? And she says yes. And the grandma apparently had a story to tell where she saw the same apparition. And that it was, when her and, the girl's dad and the girl's uncle and the grandpa were sitting in the living room. And, she sees a guy standing over the girl's dad, and he looks down and he's smiling. And, there's never any negative vibes with this guy. He's just kind of a watchful protector. A dark knight. No. But no, he's just like kind of looking over the family. They don't all have to be evil. So she says that she's actually seen them a few more times. And when she moved out, her grandma actually, in an update, told her that when her younger cousins were over, they're about 3 years old, they said that they were playing with a man. And that, they were not afraid they were not afraid or anything. They were having, a fun little time. And of course they can see him because they're children. And as we've talked about before, pets and children can see ghosts. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they're pure of soul or something like that. I don't know. But they can see him. And it's just, it's nice because he's not trying to hurt them. He's just looking over them. And they say that nothing sinister or evil has ever happened, and that anyone that walks into the house just feels warm and calm. So they have this positive thought, and I think it's pretty accurate, that the ghost is protecting their family and protecting the house. So I'm not sure if it's, a relative who had passed before, or, if it's just an owner of the house who's just a very kind person. But, there's a lot of interesting possibilities. And apparently the grandma and the grandpa were the first ones in the house. But they tried to research the area and they couldn't find anything. But their dad and their uncle were adopted. So it's possible that maybe it was like an adopted parent. So it's possible that maybe it was their actual birth parent, birth dad, maybe a birth relative. But you never know. So it's really interesting. And I'm also seeing that she says that it looks like a 1960s trench coat and a fedora. So it's possible that it could be the birth parents of, her dad and her uncle because they're adopted. But what else was interesting was that she is talking about using an app. And the app that she's talking about using is called the GhostTube app. So I'm not really sure about the GhostTube app, but I will definitely look into that and get back to you guys because that is very interesting. And, if it's legit, I might have to try that out. And I'll let you know how that goes if that ends up happening. So I'll start off by saying I've always been open-minded. So is my friend and her partner. We all have had our strange or odd encounters over the years, and sometimes came up with logical explanations or left it to the unknown. We have never had something like this happen before. Well, the car part. So this happened a couple hours ago. Me, my friend, and her partner were downstairs about to watch a film. Their young son, who was 4 years old, was upstairs fast asleep. Stairs are in the front room, which is where we were sitting. And their 4-week-old daughter was in the Moses basket by the sofa. We had turned off all the lights, shut the curtains, and gotten comfortable. There was a small bang upstairs, so my friend's partner went to check on their son and make sure that he was fine. But as the partner walked down the stairs, he heard almost like a wind chime jingle from their bedroom, and he said out loud, like, that's weird, but put it down as a possible draft somewhere. Not even 5 minutes later, we get comfortable, go to watch the film. My friend and I notice car lights outside, and they're rather bright, so we take a peek. It's their car. Full beams on for 10 to 15 seconds, then off. And we all looked at each other, dumbfounded. Then again, a bit longer this time, then the indicators flashed a few times, then stopped. As it stopped, their son screamed like not even a second had passed. And he started screaming and crying to the point where he was so wound up he was nearly sick. Of course, as soon as he screamed, the dad ran straight upstairs as my best friend was breastfeeding. The dad brought him down and he was inconsolable. Being that he was only 4, he couldn't exactly say much but just some broken words. Then the TV went off with no warning. A bang upstairs, and then silence. We spoke for a good hour or so trying to decipher what had just happened. but the car keys were in the other room, nowhere near any living animal or human. When we approached the car, my friend's partner and I checked it to make sure that it was locked. We also looked inside the car manual and had a Google search, and nothing comes up regarding the full beams just staying on and then the hazard lights intermittently going off. There was no alarm, no one around. But since then, their son won't settle. Their little girl keeps walking around randomly crying, and they have heard a couple more bangs. I have never experienced car lights being set on or off. Usually faulty electricity would make this happen when the vehicle is on, or you would have a full warning light, but there was nothing. This is a newish car as well, so it was quite full of new tech. I've had a few experiences, but usually with lights on in the home, candles, noises, but nothing to this level. Also, the first feeling I had was sickness and dread. I have not had gut feelings like this regarding the paranormal for a few years, but I genuinely felt watched and unwelcome. Yikes. Now, this is a polar opposite to the last story. This ghost has malicious intent and does not want them there. So when they first are starting their story, they are at a friend's house. Their friends have a young son and a daughter. The son is upstairs, he's sleeping, and their daughter is breastfeeding with their friend. They were getting all set to watch a movie, so they turned off the lights, shut the curtains, and they're getting all comfy. They heard a bang upstairs, so their friend went to go check on the son, because, maybe he fell or, something happened. Maybe he pushed something over. And when he was coming down the stairs, he heard like a wind chime jingle from their bedroom. And they tried to play it off like it was a possible draft somewhere, but it's like, no, that's a jingle. Like, wind does not cause, random jingles when there's nothing around to make that sound. So, very odd, but not crazy yet. Like 5 minutes later, their friend's car's high beams are on for about 10 to 15 seconds and then off. And then the hazard lights go on. So, very, very weird. They then hear the friend's son scream. They say not even a second had passed in between the lights going on at the car and the kids screaming. So the kid's crying and screaming to the point where he's like inconsolable. So whatever he experienced or saw scared the hell out of him. So, that's like 4 things right there that are going on within like a 10-minute span. So the TV then goes off with no warning, and then they hear a bang upstairs again. So very, very suspicious because something is going on now. That's 6 things in the span of 10 minutes. So if I'm the person who's the guest, I'm leaving. And if I'm the person who lives there, I don't even know what you do. Do you burn some sage? Google, I guess, what to do, but very, 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 very scary situation. The banging is what would freak me out because I get creeped out when I was at my parents' house, just hearing like creaking, just the noises that an old house makes. I already didn't like that. But if I'm hearing like loud bangs, like no, am scared to go investigate, but I feel like I should because something just happened. The noise didn't make itself. So definitely a very scary situation. And they say that since that, their son won't settle and keeps waking up randomly and crying. And they've heard a couple more bangs. So I have never heard of, ghosts really affecting cars all like that. But, they have been known to affect technology. And they said it's a newer car. So, I guess it wouldn't be exempt from, any paranormal happenings, I suppose. But definitely a very interesting story. And in the comments, the author provides an update saying that their friend has been cleansing their home and that they have been cleansing their own home as well. And that they also spent some time in their son's room letting some light in and playing some music. She said now her friend, every night before her kid goes to sleep, clearly states for any uninvited energies to stay away and, is trying to do their best to, cleanse or calm whatever entity is unhappy. And they say that they have been staying in one room, but tonight their son is back in their own room and the dad is monitoring, and it's, they're proceeding with caution, but they say so far so good. But it's just so interesting because I'm always interested in the why. Why is this going on? What happened to this entity? Why are they upset? And what can you do about it? Because it's like, they're not here anymore. So unless it's hard to find out because they can't just tell you unless, sometimes people can just straight up talk to them through different, spirit boxes and listening to different audios. But it's hard to right a wrong that happened before they even moved in or possibly before they were even alive. So it's always just like a scary situation whenever there's an unpleasant entity in a house, because it's hard to know how to proceed. But hopefully that ghost is at peace and will leave them and their family alone now. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Ooh, Real Stories. This week you have heard Don't Mess with Antiques by Ninebreaker AC. Then Same Man by Sammy JDH 6666. And finally, Interesting Experience at a Friend's House by Queen Kijo. All stories were read with the permission of their respective authors. And again, if you have a story that you'd like to hear at the show, please email it to me at thearspodcast@gmail.com. And once again, go to betterhelp.com/realstories for 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp and get matched with a therapist who will listen and help. Thank you all for listening, and everybody stay safe, and I'll see you next week with a brand new episode.